All right, we should be live in probably 3, 2, 1. All right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Seattle Day Night Live. Hopefully you guys are all doing great this evening. Like I said, today we've got a special guest. Many of you may know him, many of you may not. But if you've seen or gone to Codestrap's YouTube channel, you probably recognize, well, you actually don't have your face up that often. But if you haven't, you've probably seen him on maybe Tom Nash or one of the many other places that you're at. Also, I think, thank you for joining us tonight. And
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
yeah. No, I'm just I'm excited again to have you here. I was actually, I felt really bad when I was like, I did that Snowflake versus Palantir style video, and like I was going through like Tom Nash's stuff back then,
Yeah.
and then I slowly found, I think, a Meet, and then through him I found you, but like I'd already put out all the content, and I was like, okay, now it's too late. So it's what it is.
That was good, because then I was like, well, let me just get you like Foundry access, and then you can check it out. You know?
Yes. Hopefully, I've got a meeting set up with now Francisco. I think so. Hopefully, we'll see if it pans out. But hoping to get some Foundry access, at least play with it. Again, I've kind of been excited seeing the videos you put out recently with like the kind of the like developer experience kind of workflow. We can talk about that later, but from someone that came from a like Facebook giant tech company background, it felt very like familiar, like everything's super integrated and feels really smooth. But I mean, like, again, I wanted to start with like talking about your background, kind of how you got into tech, and then like kind of where you started, just because I feel like, again, you talk a lot about Palantir, but I don't feel like you often explain kind of where you're coming from. So how did you kind of get started in programming and solutions architecture in general?
So like programming, I got started in, God, I was young. I mean, it was young for me at the time. I was like 16 or something, but I'd started helping my grandparents with bookkeeping, and I started to just help them put a lot of the stuff they had traditionally done on paper into computers and spreadsheets, and build ways to like automate ways they were tracking rents and tracking other things. And that just led me into Java for some reason. I don't know why, but like, I think at the time it was like Java applets were brand new, and like no one had ever seen a way to like stream video on the internet or do what a Java applet could do. And I was like really impressed by that. So like went out and wanted to learn a lot about Java. And then I ended up taking some programming in college. Like I wasn't a CS major, but I did take a few programming classes. And even back, what's funny is like back then they had these classes, like they were called like Introduction to the Internet, and like it was like, how do you use bookmarks? Like there was no search engine, so you're like, people were like trading bookmark menus and stuff like that. So like that was what really kind of got me into the web. Was my introduction to the web was back then. And I dropped out of college to start like an interactive shop with a friend of mine. We got really inspired at that time to build an interactive product for the action sports industry, and we did a lot of custom development in the sort of interactive space. And we worked a lot in the action sports industry for sure. Mm-hmm. And that was like trial by fire. It was just learn, man. Like I always say, I'm a software engineer by trade. I was still pretty young at the time. I was still like 21 at that time. And it was like learning VB, .NET Classic and SQL, and like just these old school stacks. And even back then, we still had to like rack and stack our own servers, and there was no cloud. We leased space at data centers. Like it was pretty old school back then. But I learned a ton, and like I think that experience was pretty awesome as a founder too. Like we got angel investors, and we were trying to bootstrap a company, and we did fairly well as far as like a couple of young kids who really didn't know what they were doing. But it was really informative, like in terms of how the amount of effort, the amount of work, the amount of risk that goes into like a technology startup. And that startup eventually failed, and I was like 24 at the time. I can't remember if the .com bubble had happened. I think it had already blown up, by that point.
Yeah.
And I went to work for the Hallmark Channel. So like the Hallmark Channel is like a cable network, and I was their director of new media, which basically meant like figure out how to use this funky internet thing and how we're going to leverage SMS and cell phones in our sweepstakes, and like go out there and build advertiser integrations for like the on-air broadcast stuff. And they basically would give away the work we do as part of like a ad sales marketing campaign. They have this big event in New York every year called like Upfront. I don't know if they still do it with COVID and everything, but like basically it's where all the advertisers go to meet the cable networks, and they do all this business to sell their upfront advertising for the year. But we'd come in and we'd like layer in all this interactive stuff on top of it that they would typically give away for free as a way to like kind of sweeten the deal. And so we would build like websites for their shows, and we'd build sweepstakes when you would do like an on-air sweepstakes, and you would like text message this number, you know, like SMS this number. And we were building all the back end for that. But that was like where I got a huge introduction to like software engineering proper, like in an enterprise, you know. And most of the people there were Java engineers. There's a big J2E stack, and they taught me a lot about you know, how to actually integrate all these things. And what's funny is like back then we had similar problems. Like we were back then we were building what we called rich internet applications on top of Flash Player, but it's kind of a similar architecture. Like the J2E stack provided SOAP web services as sort of our back end. The client was stateful. We did a lot of video streaming. That we used this product called Flash Media Server, which did a lot of the messaging and communication and managing streams. And it's kind of a similar architecture to kind of where we're at today. You know, if you just look at it objectively.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk about that though.
Well, everything repeats itself. Like that's,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, absolutely.
In technology, like there's usually like two good solutions, and everything else is just, you know, pushing stuff together. But like I feel like everyone, it's like divergent evolution, right? Like everyone kind of comes to the same conclusion. Whether you do it by yourself or you use a book, it's like, usually a good solution.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like me and my friends joke about that a lot who are a little bit older in the industry. It's like, you know, it's almost like every now and then just some new novel framework or tool comes along to like sort of solve the same problem. We might be working in different stacks a little bit, but for the most part, it's the challenges are still the same. Like even back then we were dealing with like, how do you deal with occasionally connected clients and multiple people operating on both laptops and phones? And like a lot of the challenges like that came out of that era are still relevant. You know, in terms of like the type of design decisions that need to be made to power those stacks and those applications. It's just Flash died, and we moved to RESTful services. SOAP kind of went away for most stuff that's happening, and you know, but that experience was amazing. Like working in an actual enterprise, getting trained by actual real Java engineers, everything from design patterns to the stack. I think at that time we used this product called BEA WebLogic, which I think got acquired by Oracle at some point. But that was a really cool introduction to engineering. And then I went on from there to work for a company that did kiosks and like websites and applications for mobile for new home sales. So like you build like these 3D replicas of like houses and big developments. And it was really cool because we got to incorporate the work from a lot of 3D artists. And that was actually pretty awesome place to work, and got to run a team there. And pretty much by the time I was like 29, I got super burnt out. I was working constantly. And so my wife and I, like, we sold everything we owned, and we moved to Costa Rica for like 6 years.
Oh, what? Nice.
So like, dude, it was an awesome experience, like best experience ever. But at that time I'd been cranking for over a decade, like trying to run a company and then just fully building up my career, learning constantly. And I just got burnt out, and like we wanted to just spend more time together. And when I moved down there, I just started doing remote work for the people that I liked, you know? And so it was super mellow. I didn't have to worry about any like deadlines or running teams. I was just doing coding. And that's all I wanted to do at that time anyway, because I was just so burnt out from all the other stuff. And Amazon came along. I started working with AWS a lot while I was down there, which was really cool, you know? And that sort of explosion really, that changed everything. I mean, that was like kind of the time when things, for me anyway, things really shifted. And I think that since AWS, that's really defined the last, like, you know, I think it's been a little over, or it's been like a decade now, basically, close to a decade. I think that's really defined it, you know, over the last decade or so. So it's been a big shift. But anyway, like what I eventually came back. When I was working in Costa Rica and came back here, I was working for an Adobe certified solutions partner, and I got to work directly with Adobe. I got to consult on things like Photoshop Server, which they were working on, InDesign Server. Work directly with their team, like building some of their online editing tools that they've since launched. And I got early access to a lot of their tools. That was an awesome experience, but also got to work with companies like Pfizer and Disney. And like, it's funny, like you're just this little boutique Adobe certified solutions partner in the Bay Area, but we were getting to work on some crazy projects with huge companies. And that's where I really like cut my teeth on software architecture, because I got to work across all these various stacks with all these different companies. And what's interesting though is there's a lot of commonality. Like no matter what industry you're in, there's a lot of the same shit going on, a lot of the same tools, same stacks. But it definitely like taught me how to like manage a really large code base for one, like, because not a lot of people get to work on a code base that large where you literally have like over 100 customers. There's a lot of custom code that has to be merged with core product. How do you make that work? How do you make the engineers productive in a system like that? Essentially a mono repo architecture with all of our front end and back end in it. So that was a pretty awesome experience. And then the owner of the company, he trusted me a lot, so he gave me kind of like free reign to engineer the stack that I wanted, and I got to work with some really good people over there as well. But that really, like, I think informed a lot of the innovative ideas I would have, because most people don't get to work in a situation like that. A lot of places you go, they have that already. Like they have their platform and ecosystem for building, and you don't get to engineer that, But that was amazing to like get to actually engineer a mono repo, actually engineer a full stack that's used by like real companies, and that was pretty amazing time. And I got to work with some really cool people and some new products. Working with real products that Adobe was launching was pretty awesome. But eventually, like, I moved on, and now I work for the world's largest ed tech company. We have over 350 million unique monthly users. We're in 10 different countries. I'm the VP of technology there, and I get to work with an old friend of mine who I used to work with when I founded my own company back in the day, which was really cool. So,
I think it's always. Oh, sorry, not trying to interrupt. I think it's always interesting in terms of the fact that, like, if anyone's out, like people that are watching right now, it's like the world is much smaller than you think, especially the tech world. And then especially if you're here from the data world, it's like the more and more I work in it, the more and more everyone's connected. So if you're a solid worker, 10 years from now, you never know what that's going to lead to, because you're going to talk to someone and they're going to be like, oh, hey, can I work with you again? I really like working with you at that one project. So
exactly. But we're having a ton of fun, dude. Like reconnecting with him has been amazing. Like it's cool when you hook up with people where you have a similar history and like you kind of went through the same era of technology. It's like, I think there's something to that. I don't know what it is, but I know that some of the best work I've seen is among people who are like paired up that way. They kind of went through the similar experience. They went through the similar time period, and for some reason that just leads to these like really cool outcomes. I don't know what it is though.
So sounds like the PayPal mafia.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Maybe we'll be the next PayPal mafia. I hope so.
So that since you've actually seen, like, again, like I've kind of seen probably some tail end of like more on-prem stuff switching over to cloud. You've kind of seen, I think, a little bit farther than that. Like what skills do you think are like kind of like timeless almost for engineers, for data people that like have kind of like spanned that year? Like if an engineer has these skills, like they're gonna be there no matter what. So people always ask me like, what skills are good to learn? So I'm just curious, like your thoughts on that.
I mean, like everything from Uncle Bob and Martin Fowler, like you could just spend some time just reading work from them. I think is pretty timeless. Like to me, it's always gets back to design patterns. So like I remember there was this one book, I think it was called like Common J2E Design Patterns. It had like a zebra on the cover. I think it's this book that's been reprinted like 10 different times. There's all these different editions. It's generally the same book though. But learning those architectural patterns that came out of the J2E world first, I think are super important. There isn't a problem that hasn't been sort of thought of and solved. It's pretty rare you're going to run into a problem that the only space where that's happening now is really in the machine learning space, where we don't have reference architectures really. But in just about everything else, there's a best practice reference architecture you could probably pull from, and there's a good chance it's been documented in these design patterns. And so yeah, I think the Common J2E Design Patterns book would be a great place to start learning. And then stuff by Uncle Bob is pretty much timeless. I love that guy. Clean Architecture is a great book. And then the articles by Fowler that are up there are really good if you want to start experimenting with more sort of modern architectures like CQRS, for example, or event sourcing would be really good to read. But I think, start with design patterns. And then, of course, like you could study like model view, whatever architectures, like whether you want to debate model view controller or model view presenter or whatever the crap you want to call it. Basically driving an app off of data model in a view with like reactive data or immutable data. It doesn't have to be a reactive data model. But that idea of separating the data from the view could clearly delegating responsibility, maybe using events and command maps or whatever, however you want to do it, and whatever architecture you prefer to learn in. But it is good to not just know React, and not just know Angular, because there's a lot of underlying design patterns that are common to all of those frameworks. It's just they might have a slightly novel way in which they drive their view. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's, again, one thing, less on the software side, more on the data side. Like, that's something that always kind of comes back. I think I saw Joe Rice is in the chat somewhere. I don't know if he's still here, but I know we've talked about that, as he's kind of putting together a book on like data engineering, how much he's doing so much research and things are just staying the same as much as they're changing. So it's how this world works. Kind of on that, like, what do you look for, I guess, like in a developer in terms of those skill sets? When you are looking to hire someone, like what's a good sign, especially for like a younger developer who's like, we have either zero experience and you're gonna have to mold them a little bit. So what are those skills?
You're gonna have to mold them a lot, man. I look for like commitment to lifelong learning. Like how passionate are they about actually learning and showing up every day, and like wanting to just be passionate about understanding new things and absorbing knowledge. But the other is like have an opinion. Like I like people with strong opinions that are loosely held. I don't like developers that don't have an opinion about something. It's like, I don't know why. I just feel like if you don't have an opinion about something, you're never going to be able to like deal with all the arguments and all the design decisions. And I don't mean arguments in a bad way. I mean arguments in like a good way. Like you're debating about whether this way of doing something is better than this way of doing something. And in order for you to give valuable input to that design process, you got to have an opinion. So like I'll often ask engineers in interviews, like, name me some technologies you want to die right now that you just can't stand. So if they don't have an answer to that, it's kind of like a red flag. I get bummed out because I'm like, come on, you gotta there's got to be something you hate. I mean, you can't tell me you love email,
I speak like on email. Like I just want, like, my personal preference is like I just want everything in Slack. Like I'm like, it could be email, I don't care, but like, could it just be in Slack for me? Because that would be amazing if it was just in one place, so I don't have to go to my email, my Slack, my Mattermost to get all of these notifications. They're all kind of the same. An email is just a thread, so if you could just like,
Yep. Exactly. Email's up my number. That's like the number one on the list of things that need to die is definitely email. But like, anyways, I like to ask developers, like, what are your opinions about technologies you hate? What are technologies that you love? Like, what do you work on open source projects? Do you have a side gig? Like, so I just kind of want to know, like, gauge their level for learning, and like, are they really in this for the next 10 years, or this is like, this can be a hobby or whatever. The other is just like, it's sort of like, how can you problem solve in a group? So like, we always try to put people through the paces of like, even if they're right about something, challenging them and saying like, no, that's not correct, and seeing like what the dynamic is that can play out, not to be manipulative, but just to see like, how do you deal with disagreement? Especially like if you're in an interview is always kind of a high pressure situation. You're nervous, and I think that the team is always super polite, but we want to see how you respond if you're challenged on a question, or can you continue to, you're not going to like just say, oh, okay, I'm wrong. Like you should, if you're right, you're right. You should be able to know, say you're right, and then go back and forth in a design meeting, like, and try and see how you play off the group. And if you get excited about stuff, that's great. Like if you're finding things where you're like, oh, that's really cool, let's dive into that. If you find engineers who get excited about new solutions they haven't seen, or just solving a problem together, that's a really good thing, because that's pretty much what you're going to be doing for a living. It's like you're going to be working together to solve problems. So we kind of look for those things. There are like the technical interview side, and we don't really test a lot of algorithms. Like we kind of tend to be more focused on the role you're going to be in, because we operate within an ecosystem as well. We have our own like sort of framework that we built on top of React and the way we want like software built. We also have a similar thing in our Go microservices layer and our GraphQL layer. Like we kind of have a way we know that we want you to work, and that's not going to involve a lot of algorithms. But we want to know like, how good are you with the tools? How good are you at troubleshooting issues in the CI/CD pipelines, and like, what are your command line skills like, and like, do you know the underlying technology? So it's like we kind of look for those things more in the tech interview than testing for algorithms. Truth be told, a lot of software engineers don't do a lot of science. So it's like kind of what we're looking for. That's not to say that's what every company is looking for, but that's kind of what we're looking for right now.
Yeah. I think I remember reading something similar from I have this book right here. What is it? An Elegant Puzzle. Like when he was talking about instead of like asking DS&A questions, why not just be like,
Yep.
hey, you had this bug recently that you had to solve. Why not ask them how they would solve it? Because that's
Exactly.
what they're going to be doing on a daily basis, right? Like,
Yep.
how would you solve this bug? Because that's like 50% of our work anyways, right?
We've literally done that too. Like they do that a lot in the tech interviews is they'll go through some system outage or bug they had and like try and see how the developer would approach it. But that's the job, right? I mean, that's what you spend like most of your time doing. But we do have, obviously we have senior engineers that are responsible for answering the hard problems. But like we try to like, when we're hiring engineers, we try to hire like at L1, like level 1, and then we try to promote from within and build up the senior pool,
Yeah.
So we don't do a whole lot of hiring. I mean, we have in the past, but we're trying to move away from that model and really like when you get hired, just like you're software engineer, there's not going to be the senior software engineer or super duper senior software engineer. We just want to hire software engineers and then like kind of cultivate that talent internally. And I think that'll be more the model moving forward than maybe what we did in the past.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm going to kind of slide this into your some of your like side projects that you're doing. And for everyone who's listening, I will switch over to Palantir because I'm sure there's plenty of people who want to hear about Palantir. I think you want to talk about Palantir, and we will get there. But yeah, besides Palantir and like your interest there and doing the YouTube channel there,
Yep.
you also have like Codestrap.me. So I'm like kind of curious, why did you start it? Is it somewhat related to like what you've just been talking about, like trying to train software engineers or data engineers to being ready for work, and where kind of degrees tend to kind of miss out on the actual practicality? Like, is that kind of your goal there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, I think every major FANG company, every major technology company now has a software apprenticeship program. There's like 17 major ones that I know of that are documented in an article I linked to on that site. But I want to raise awareness to that because you absolutely do not need a CS degree, in my opinion, if you want to enter the field. But you do need like strong math background. You need to be pretty sharp, and you need to not mind like working alone on a problem for a whole day and getting frustrated. And like you can't necessarily be a people person wanting to interact with people all day long to be a software engineer. But you don't need a degree, in my opinion. And also just that the cost of degrees are insane. Like I know we debated on the price, but if you actually factor in like all of the costs, it's like $127,000 on average to go to a 4-year university. And even if you took the raw tuition cost, which is anywhere between like $30,000 and $50,000, depending on whether you're going in-state, out of state, and it goes up from there, by the way, if you want a private school. But like that's just a barrier to entry most people can't get over. It's like, and also not only that, is it really the arguments. Like, I don't know if you've looked at the salary trajectories, but they're not going up. They're kind of going down right now. So you could actually be in a place where I think that you would be a little bummed out with the debt level you would have at 22, 23, just entering the workforce. Then I really believe there's absolutely no reason we can't recruit directly out of high school. I don't believe there's any reason a kid can't learn software engineering fundamentals, which include like your CLI skills, your Git skills, your AWS skills, one language under your belt. They can't. I totally believe, because I see these kids do it today. They're doing that in high school, that we could recruit out of high school and create L1 pipelines where we teach both hard skills and soft skills. But by the time you're 24, 25, you might be a senior developer, so why not put kids on that path? And to me, that makes a lot of sense. Also, like every company kind of approaches this a little bit different. I know there's tremendous overlap, but every company kind of has their own way of building software, especially as they scale. So like once you get past like 100 engineers, you kind of go through this gate where like all of the shitty ways you used to work don't work anymore. And I don't know what it is about that 100 engineer number, but like you got to have commonality, frameworks, automation, KPIs, monitoring, controls over your code. Like you got to have your shit together. And if you don't, you're never going to scale. But what's funny is they don't teach you that in school, and there's no manual to do it. You just kind of got to have to figure it out. So that kind of leads to this weird way in which every company kind of approaches that problem a little differently. And so like bringing people into a program early on, not only will it teach them all the foundational skills and the things that are common, it'll help get a senior software engineer that's finely tuned to your business at a very young age, And I think that's really powerful. So yeah, it's definitely it's why I started the YouTube channel originally, and I just started talking about Palantir all the time. That's bizarre. Yeah.
I know you should just be called like there's a lot of like Palantir only channels, and like I don't know if I think the only things I've seen on your channel is Palantir. So
yeah.
Great job at diversifying.
I know. I've definitely got to diversify. I think I did like one video on Snowflake and one video on Databricks and a couple other random videos, but yeah, no one watched those, so I just kept doing the Palantir ones.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting about like, and there'll be a few more questions here before Palantir, but like about Palantir is like there is definitely like a group of people that will, if there's a new Palantir video, will click it. It's like almost regardless of who made it. And then there are people who really stand out in it, like again, like Amit, like you. And then those people just continue to get the views, and it's like it's very interesting seeing that.
Yeah, the community kind of grew a lot too. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, we're sort of getting to this level now where it's like we want to get to the Tesla community level. I think is like what it is. Like that's our goal. You know, we're trying to get there. We'll get there eventually. But we're quickly growing, quickly rising. So hopefully one day it'll be pretty cool.
So I guess like on the side projects in terms of like, you know, courses, is there anything you're kind of trying to build this year that's kind of newer that you're hoping to land this year to help teach people more about some subjects?
Yeah, like I mean, I did the data engineering track, but it's primarily designed for people who are going to enter an apprenticeship program. So it's like it's not designed for someone who's like a software engineer and wants to get into data engineering. It's like you don't know anything. You need to go from like the command line to like basic data engineering skills so you can enter an apprenticeship program to learn actually how to do data engineering. And so, but it will get you through like basic Python and Spark skills, SQL skills. You'll have all your fundamentals for command line, Docker, AWS. Like it'll give you all a really good foundation. So when you go to enter these programs, you can kick serious ass and be through them relatively quickly. But that track was really fun because I did get some input from people at Palantir that it's not official or anything. Like I can't be like, but they did give me some input on what's, you know, what would be valuable. And they also recommended some MIT courses that are in there as well. So like MIT has a non-student whatever thing anyone can enroll. And I thought those courses were really cool, actually. There's like one on supply chain management and another on statistics. Yeah. I thought those were like super cool. They'll be a little challenging for some people who haven't gotten through college level calculus, like the statistics one. But assuming you can get the prereq on the math, that should be fine. And you can take that online or go to a community college to take college level calculus, or you know, all the way up through algebra 1 if you want to. But yeah, so anyway, that's the thing I just published recently, and then I'm just trying to find people who want to participate. You know, like someone is not go fork the repo, man. Like issue me a pull request for a track you want to create. Like it's totally open. It's out there for anyone who wants to create tracks or employers who want to create apprenticeships, you know.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's the fun thing about building anything, right? And this is I think the discussion everyone knows about, for one, Palantir or any product. It's like you can build the best product in the world, or you can build just a product, but the hardest part, like it's adoption, right? Like getting people to actually adopt a thing, even if it's good, it's harder than you think.
It's super hard, dude.
It's
most of those projects just sit there, you know. It's like it's an empty place in the internet for most projects. You know, you think, where are all the people? You know. But yeah, no, it's hard to get traction on stuff. But like for me, I just keep persevering, and I'm also really excited because we're building this at work too. So like we do have an L1 pipeline that we're working on, and we are going to teach the hard and soft skills, and so I'm very excited about that. I think it'll open up a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I'm very excited about getting that going. So that's a reward in and of itself. And then Palantir has been super supportive of that stuff too. They have their own early talent development program as well. So it's pretty cool. It's really cool to see the whole industry like shift around it really fast. I mean, it was like in a period of 3 years that pretty much they went from like a few people like Microsoft offering this to like now everyone kind of offers it. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let's go into transitioning to Palantir, just because again, I think that's your bread and butter currently, and I do hope to see like again, I'd love to see more things on your channel, but what led you to Palantir? Like why the big focus on it? Like what got you there? From going from building Java applets to now being like Palantir is the way for a lot of companies. Like what got you there?
I just think we have a common vision for where software is kind of going. So like I spent 5 years working on ML and big data projects, but what I really see under the hood is like, number one, people got to liberate their data and learn how to work with it. Like there's a lot of data that's locked up in silos and it's completely mismanaged. There's no quality. A lot of people don't even know what raw data is, by the way, too. So like most people aren't tracking raw data. They're tracking some data that's been filtered through some fucking algorithm, and that's what ended up in some, columnar database somewhere, and they're calling that raw data. I'm like, it's not fucking raw data, dude. It's like you've lost your raw data. So
Nice.
like I think one, there's this sort of data liberation, knowing how to work with data. The other is like legacy IT debt. So like,
Yeah.
if you've ever worked with legacy IT, like you want to take it. It's like that scene from Office Space where the guy's like destroying the fax machine with like the baseball bat. They take it all out there. Like that's the level of frustration people have with legacy IT. And there is a better way in which we could be operating our businesses. And I really think that revolves around how we've been doing it in the ML space, which is like we want to surface signals in our data, right? Like we want to find the signals. We want to take action against those signals so we can make like informed data-driven decisions. But we don't want to do that in some legacy ERP stack that quote has a data lake now, because that shit is terrible to use, has like a negative NPS score. Like no one wants to work in those systems, and it's better to put human beings at the edges of that system, So like really the human beings should be monitoring what the machines are doing and taking action when they see something like deviate, or something that's a red flag. We shouldn't have humans at the center of those systems using like RPA software to automate away the problems with the UX and the pain of having to use those systems. So that's sort of like I think we just have this like view of the future of where things can go if we properly leverage ML. And really it's make your business move at the speed of the data stream. If your business can move and operate at the speed the data comes in, that's where we want to be. But that said, we don't want decisions bottlenecking in engineering. So like I had this idea a long time ago that's like this epiphany came to me a few years back where I was like, all we're doing here is like taking the data and then we're bottlenecking in engineering, and like every now and then a decision is going to come out the other end of this thing. That's like a really slow, really painful process. And it's like, no, you need to open that stream up so that non-technical people can make decisions. This is not where we want to be. We're like, engineering teams build Rube Goldberg fucking machines and answer one question at a time. It's like, yeah, that's not going to scale. It's not going to work. So like, really, it's about how do you empower the whole organization to get on that page. And like, FANG companies have done a really good job of doing that, but not everyone can afford that. Like it's just not going to be in the cards for them. Plus, like FANG companies have had the last decade to kind of pull that together, and I don't think companies that want to compete over the next decade have that kind of time. They need a platform like Palantir. And what's interesting is like, as you start to think about like, well, why did Palantir evolve in the government space? It gets real meta because you start going, well, that was really the only space outside of like Google and maybe Facebook in which they had this amount of data, first of all. And like you actually had a data-driven decision problem, and it was also the only other entity that could afford to throw money at this problem forever, So like, there's a lot of reasons why I think we sort of wound up together. It's just like, if you have this common vision and you've dealt with the same problems and you realize what needs to change, you're going to align with developers who share that vision. It's kind of like when I was telling you before, you align with people who came up in the same era as you. It's just because like you have those connections, and like you automatically are thinking about problems in the same way, and nothing but goodness comes out of that, dude. You just start cranking decisions, and like it's been super fun to work with them, because it's like when you're with a bunch of developers who are thinking that way, like it's pretty incredible the type of like inspiration you start getting off one another. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I think that's what ended up happening, is just like I saw what Foundry could be when I initially heard about the platform. I was like, oh, this is the solution. It's not just one more tool in the stack. It's just not one more thing we got to put together so we can fail again. Like, this is the actual solution that's going to unlock data-driven decision for the masses. And I was like, that's going to change everything. And then I learned about their edge AI capabilities later on, and I was like, holy shit. Like, the fact that they can deploy this shit to satellites, right? And have a constant feedback loop between the ground-based models and the satellite models, and they have this like really novel way of making that all work, and they have a product like Apollo to power it all. I was like, oh man, you guys are so far ahead of like where any of us are at right now. Like, it's pretty insane. And yeah, so like that just blew me away. And I mean, the amount of tech they've built over the last 17 years, like, it's deep, dude. Like, it's pretty crazy. It's right up there with, it's superior to most companies, in my opinion, because it was like, if you F up something at Facebook, maybe you lose some ad revenue, but if they F up something at Palantir, like, people get killed, So like, they have a high stakes environment that they operate in, and they've sort of built their whole culture around that in a way. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that why they launched a satellite into space last week to show?
I think I mean they launched it because it's a DoD project, like
Okay,
it's I think they're tracking submarines with it and ships and all kinds of other shit. They do have a novel like cloud cover model they built themselves, which I thought that was really cool. Like rather than just incorporating like everyone's model from a different company, like they did acquire some models that they're using from other companies, but they have their own like unique cloud cover model that they put on there.
Yeah.
But the really cool part of that system is how they actually can provide a continuous feedback loop for the models. And so they take the training data that the models gathered on device and they combine it with the training data that they've incorporated on ground, and they can find the optimal version of that model, and they can send just the parts that need to be merged between the ground and the satellite model. And they can that shit was crazy, like how they actually pulled that off. And there's some other really like novel things they did in there where I was like, wow, you guys are just way ahead at this point. But they have that same capability like to do that with sensors, and like be able to do that with factory deployments and stuff. So that technology, like through Apollo, is going to be pretty revolutionary for people who want that, who need that like onboard device training. I mean, anyone who wants to take advantage of federated learning, basically, which is pretty much everyone. That's us. I mean, pretty much every model we want on device if we can get it on device. We're even like had talks about like, what if we built purpose-built devices? Because then we can get all of the resources of this device rather than being limited to what Apple or Google will give us, So a lot of people are thinking about like how, the IoT explosion is probably just going to keep continuing as more and more ML gets pushed out to these specific devices for specific tasks. So,
yeah, I can't say I've at that scale. I have a few small projects that are doing IoT, but it's very, very small and very cute. What do you like again, like with Palantir, like what do you think is like the number one advantage that you think like it provides that other tools just don't?
Alex and I talked about this on the interview on Ticker Symbol Live, and it was like I was trying to tell him like everyone up here is like solving a specific problem, like there's all these tools that solve like one bit of the problem of this space, but like what Palantir's done is they've gone and solved more fundamental problems that just take care of this entire category of problems up here,
Sure.
And part of that is just the distributed systems problem, so like if I can take a problem that was like n equals 20, where n is the number of tools you have to incorporate, and turn it into n equals 1, there's that famous quote by Rich Hickey, like, I'm going to kick your ass because I've simplified a problem. And while you're still stuck up here pushing elephants around, which is all these distributed systems you got to manage and orchestrate, there's a fundamental complexity you're never going to get beyond, because Palantir can build like first-party integrations into every one of their microservices where the system was designed to interoperate, right? Yeah. All these other tools you got to stitch together, you're never going to get that level of orchestration and integration, and they just weren't made to do that. So like Palantir fundamentally solves a lot of the complexity problems related to the big data stacks and ML stacks in a way that other companies just can't do, and not every problem is a RESTful service problem. So like it's just, you can't. And by the way, orchestrating microservices, like I don't know if you guys realize the amount of complexity in there, but it's not fucking easy. No. So anyway, I think there's that, which is like that's one of the things that fundamentally makes them different. The other is they have that secret. Remember, I was trying to tell you, we're trying to get away from like bottlenecking and engineering and get non-technical people to make data-driven decisions. They figured that shit out like 12 years ago, or more. And so their entire platform is built around the premise that non-technical people need to make data-driven decisions. And so they have an entire way in which like you're a non-technical person, you can build a data pipeline, you can build a data set, you can build the health checks, you can build the models, you can actually build dashboards to analyze it and have it make sense, right? In a GUI that actually works kind of like a Swiss watch, it's like put together really well. That's hard, man. And that took a long time. Like they got the advantage of all that research that was done with the DoD. Like if you read about the DARPA research projects that were done, like they had focus groups that were 12 to 15,000 people strong, and so they got the benefit of all of that focus group research a long time ago, and seeing like how does explainable AI actually work with a human operator on the other end. That's a really big advantage to have at your disposal. And they figured out like a way to kind of build these systems, A, that the operator can trust, B, that they can understand, and be productive in, and that is pretty crazy. Like when you hand an organization a tool that powerful, where you don't need a bottleneck in engineering, your non-technical folks can actually make data-driven decisions and move at the speed of the data stream, you're going to kick the ever-loving crap out of just about every one of your competition, in my opinion, because everyone else is going to be stuck with this bottleneck problem, and they can never kind of get to that level where they need to be, which is like, it's not the engineer over here that needs to make the decision. It's the chief marketing officer, or it's this VP of product that has to make the decision. They're the ones tasked with the responsibility. So, and so I think that's what they offer that no one else can, is they like had the secret that it's, it's about the non-technical users. It's about getting the whole organization onto the platform, not just the engineers, but also that, they solved the n equals 50 or n equals 20 problem. They turned it into n equals 1. So it's like, I think those are the things that really differentiate it in my mind. And there's all kinds of goodness that comes with that, but that'll be more the subject of the videos, I think, explaining, what's in the platform that makes it so unique, and the features and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think it's also very interesting because like I definitely work more in the SMB space when it comes to like data stacks. So what I see, like, it is that piecemeal, but like at the same time, it's more borderline affordable. It's still currently the current problem. I think not problem. It's just like I don't even know if Palantir wants to hit that space sometimes. Maybe I'm not gonna know because I've had conversations with them and they're like, I'm like, oh, maybe like what 50, 100K. They're like, nah, we're not gonna touch that. It's like, okay. So I think that's an interesting space, but in a weird way, in another like part of the world, like this, just like looking at the current data stack, modern data stack, whatever you want to call it, space. Like there is an interesting rebundling happening where like all these tools are kind of trying to, build, like conglomerate together.
Yep.
And two, recently there's like there's like a couple posts that have been talking about like the crazy macroeconomics of like these tools, because like everyone wants to charge $50,000 for their tool a year. For like a data catalog, for a data like QA tool, so it's like by the end you still end up spending $500,000.
Oh, it's crazy.
But like it's pretty intense. So I can definitely say like integration makes sense, and that way hopefully you can reduce the cost, but also make it easier for developers just to work with all of these tools. But that kind of brings me to my, like, at least the last question I had, more about Palantir, and then we can maybe open it up to more QA. Like again, I come more from that modern data stack, like SMB side, some mid-level market kind of stuff, within Informatica and things of that nature. Like everyone I've talked to kind of in the space doesn't get Palantir, like on the data side. Again, I said this earlier, like on the finance side, it seems like there's a lot of people that love it. On the data tech side, there seems to be this like gap, and they're like, well, we don't really know what it does. Like, why do you think that is? And like, do you think they're kind of making some headway and trying to change that perception currently?
Yeah, I mean, it's a closed platform, so that's why, so it's not an open platform. You can't access the environment or the documentation unless you're like a customer. So that's definitely why that gap exists. And then they've just been bad at sales and marketing and outreach for a really long time. Like, I think that's been one of the things they've been critical about internally and publicly, is like, we sort of sucked at sales and we haven't done a good job of like developer outreach. But they are addressing it. So obviously they're like, we're trying to get you access to the platform. We're trying to get Alex from Ticker Symbol U access to the platform so that more developers can understand it, from an engineering point of view. And yeah, there is that problem. It's really expensive, but then they're creating, I think, internally a way in which they can expand it to developers who want to be part of that community and learn the tool. And I think there's some things happening in the background you'll see soon that'll show even more momentum about that, but it's really about like how to, at least from my perspective, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of Palantir, by the way, like I'm an independent person, and like I'm not like official Palantir, this is all, but like I definitely see them taking it really serious, that they need developers to solve that problem. Like software engineers should know what the platform is capable of, what the advantages and disadvantages are. Like it should be another thing they can evaluate for their companies and build a risk profile around it and position it if it solves real problems for them. So like they know that they need to do that, and they're working to do that, in my opinion. But why they haven't, I don't know. Like it's funny because I've asked them directly, like what is going on here? Like I've never seen a company go to market like this. You're the only company I've ever seen that goes to market like this. You're a closed platform. You haven't been just, sign up on a freemium tier, get to know the tools, do conferences, like, certify the developers on site. Like, but they're not, there's just like, there's a real simple explanation for that, but I can't tell you what it is. So
all right.
Like,
that's
like, fair enough.
Part of me feels like it's almost like a similar like Facebook or like club approach where it's like only like you got to bring people to us to test us out, like we're almost like too cool for you kind of feel. Like, but that's just the feel I get. It's like, yeah, we'll let you in if you bring like two of your friends with you that will pay us. It's just the feel I get.
No, man, I can't figure it out. I wish I knew. Supposedly it's a simple explanation. I don't know, but yeah, if I knew, I would tell you. But
and if you could,
if I could, but I think they're working to change it, and I definitely think like it's gonna be nice to not be the only person at my company who pushes this thing, or like it'd be nice to actually have some more advocates out there, which is why I've been fighting really hard to get you access to the platform, because I really do think you'll like it once you get your hands on it. Like for me, what it reminded me of is like the kind of tools that Google and Facebook built, but like that's unattainable for most companies. It's like, even if you're a huge company, like you are not going to have the engineering talent to execute on a platform like that. And it's fully integrated end to end, meaning like from the moment the raw data comes into the system to the moment you build an app on it out the other end, it's fully governed by the same security models. All the operations has been thought of and figured out. So like everything's driven off a sort of pull request repo concept where changes propagate out as you issue pull requests, and changes happen in the code base, which is exactly what you would build if you're sitting down to like engineer a full operational platform yourself. But it's also web-based, and people like often comment, they're like, well, why would you want a web-based IDE? But I'm like, well, your local workstation is the fucking bottleneck 90% of the time, and like it leads to the it works on my machine problem, which if you have 50 engineers who have an it works on my machine problem, like that's a huge source of slowdown. So like having integrated online developer environments is kind of a must if you're, again, getting back to that 100 engineer scaling problem. If everyone's going to work on a fucking local workstation, good luck managing that. I mean, you're going to invest a lot of energy and time and resources into maintaining those developer workstations, when in reality, like building a web-based holistic platform that solves that problem out of box and gives you access to the full power of the cloud compute resource and gets you off of your local workstation, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that means every engineer is not slowed down by every little problem that they have related to like some environment misconfiguration, some dependency update, some fucking problem with their network connectivity, like whatever it is, it's being mitigated by that. So again, that's just the way they've put that whole platform together holistically. Like people are going to freak when they get a hold of it, So I don't think it's a matter of time too. I think you're going to get a hold of it. Hopefully you get a hold of it. Hopefully Alex gets a hold of it. And then hopefully next time this year, it's like everyone's got it. Every developer who wants access to it has got it.
Yes. I was gonna say it makes me like the whole like configuration thing reminds me of my current issues that I have with my new M1 laptop. I don't know if you've tried it out, but
I haven't tried it yet. No.
There's so many things that don't work with the new chip. Like I think there's some problems with Kubernetes. There's some problems with Confluent. Like all of these things where I'm just like, gosh darn it.
Yeah, two of the guys on my team got an M1 laptop, and I was like, you mother effers, like what were you thinking? I'm like, I'm gonna lose you for like several days while you figure this thing, like,
oh man, it's been so bad. I was like, oh, it'll be great, I'm gonna have this, it's gonna be so nice. And like I got it, and then it was fine for a while until I had a project that I was like trying to do all this stuff, and I was like, this is hell, man. I'm spending like a day trying to figure out how to like figure out configurations that I've never ever wanted to figure out in my life. Like I don't want to figure out.
As soon as I get everything on a web-based IDE thing, then I'll buy one. I'm like, all right, there we go, I'm done. But yeah, we're still not quite there yet.
Bro, M1 busted.
It's like, oh yeah, you guys went out and bought M1 laptops, and now you're done for like a week.
You know what's funny? I think Apple is one of those great examples that marketing and like sales far defeat like superior technology. Like I'm not saying they're bad, but it's like like we'll pay way too much money for, and then have to buy like 30 dongles to like connect to things because marketing.
I've got like 3 on my desk right now, so I'm just like, it's pretty funny. They love to mess with the peripherals. It's like all of a sudden they come out with a new laptop and 5 of your peripherals don't work anymore. You're just like, what the hell is this thing, dude? Yeah,
but we keep buying. We're like, all right, we'll go spend $2,000 on your new laptop. That's gonna
like Apple Stockholm syndrome. We're stuck with them. We're never gonna get rid of them, dude. No, it's the go-to. Like, what are you gonna do? But like, yeah, the M1. I'm looking forward to the M1. Like, the battery usage looks amazing.
Oh yeah,
like, pretty crazy. And to not have to charge like ever during the day, that would be freaking amazing. You know,
I will say that has been like, I mean, part of this is because I no longer am using my Facebook Apple laptop, which probably had like $30,000 or 30,000 other like processes running underneath it. But yeah, my laptop runs forever. Like I could run it all day, and it's like that's the one thing that's nice. Like, oh man, that is.
Does it get hot at all or no?
What?
Does it get hot? Does it overheat at all?
I don't think so. It doesn't. It doesn't. I haven't had any issues. Again, Facebook one's always like you open it up, it's like immediately taking off. You know, the fans are just immediately like lifting it off the ground because again, whatever keystroke tracking
all the spyware. Yeah, those things are loaded with spyware, dude. Like any corporate laptop.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I get it. I understand. This is like it's not like they're the only ones doing it. Everyone does it. So
all right. You need to get a full disclosure from the company of like what is the spyware you have on my laptop.
That's true. I mean, Facebook did a lot of interesting analytics, both internally on them, like like obviously it's like, how are our employees working? So it's what they do. All right, so I don't want to keep you too late tonight, so I figure we can probably jump into some Q&A.
Sweet.
See if people have to ask questions. I'm sure you're gonna get a mix of things. Some people are probably gonna be like data engineering. Some people are maybe gonna be about Palantir. So this first one that I kind of starred here. This came up earlier when you were talking about like Palantir focusing like on non-technical users. So basically, what happens to data engineers then? Are more hired to expand the systems, or do they go away? What are your thoughts there?
They definitely don't go away. I think data engineers might need to retool a little bit. It'll be less about tools and maybe a little more about the science behind like what is your data architecture actually like? How do you make the Spark queries more performant by adjusting your partition size or your indexing strategy or like whatever it is you're going to do to try and actually improve the architecture of the data lakes and of the data warehouses. Whereas a lot of time now is just spent like making all this shit work, Yeah. So I think on some level it'll get down to more statistical analysis, more actual science. Some data engineers will go and build their own indexing systems, but it will be less about the tools and more about the lower level tech, I think, at the end of the day. And like, what can you actually contribute to the Spark distribution too? So like learn Scala. So I would say it's like maybe and maybe some Java, but like I think most of the Spark code base is Scala. So I think a lot of it will be working. Like you're going to actually you're actually going to need the science at that point, because it won't necessarily be about gluing together pipelines and stuff like that, in my opinion. That's where most of our data engineers are focused right now. It's like trying to solve those kind of problems. So it's like, because that all that speed increase that you can generate by just these incremental improvements actually is pretty fucking cool. And like starts getting the best thing in the world is get that feedback loop faster, And so all of the efficiencies you can build in that underlying layer, it really does like have a downstream effect. It gets amplified over time. So improving the speed of those queries, everything from the data architecture, partition structure, indexing strategies, all the way down into the Spark code itself. I think like the distribution and doing custom programming there to improve things, I think will be really valuable for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's also interesting because I usually tell people it's funny how we've shifted from like a world where you used to care about how many like bytes were in a column to now it's like how much data is being processed like on a gigabyte or terabyte scale, right? Like how do we reduce that down? So I think that's kind of what you're referencing. It's like it's just
you'll spend a lot of time with the query planner and the execution graph, So it's like that's where and that's really where you should be spending the majority of your time.
In theory, yes.
In theory.
Oh man,
but you're not going away. Definitely not. It's just going to be a different job that you'll be doing. You'll be focusing on what you should be focusing on, in my opinion.
What was it say? So again, more of a interest in like what does the market for junior data engineers look like? Kind of how you view it. Have you seen people? Are people hiring more of those, or what are your opinions there?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think yes, people are hiring more. I don't know what the long-term outlook would look like. Like even as you talked about, like more companies are coming together to try and put these platforms together, whether it's like that alliance that started with there's like, I don't know, 10 different companies coming together. But I think that the long-term outlook is a bit sketchy because if it does go more into the science, you might need more education in order to participate in there. That is one area. Like before I was talking about software engineering, you don't need a degree, but if it does turn into something where you need to develop new indexing strategies or you're trying to build more efficiencies into the Spark distribution, a lot of that shit does get into the science. And so you may need the junior market may shrink a little bit, but that's pure speculation on my part. It's just thinking like, if the problems related to putting the tools together go away and it becomes more about the efficiencies of the underlying processes and execution of those queries, and then the speed of the pipelines, like those are lower level problems, and you might need to retool, and maybe like there's not as many jobs for that. I'm not sure. It's a good question though.
Yeah. I think it's always been hard for it's like junior data engineer positions, and I feel like junior DevOps positions kind of have a similar problem where it's like you almost need the experience. One, it's like never taught in school, and you almost need the experience to like break into it. So it's like really awkward. It's like, how do you get that experience? Like as a software engineer, you can kind of find some of that opportunities, but like the scale of like solid DevOps or the scale of like solid data engineering is just so big that you often have to work somewhere to do it. So it's always hard.
There's like the other thing to think about there too is like the whole reason we had a DevOps explosion, in my opinion, and then the data engineering explosion is like you couldn't put a data scientist on an actual engineering problem. Like they want to do the science. They don't want to sit there and worry about data quality and labeling and all that other stuff that goes along with it. I would say that the area of labeling is one in which maybe that is an entry point, because that problem's still big, and not everyone has figured out how to like automatically label shit. Like there's only a few people that kind of put that problem together. So there could be a lot of room that would combine the software engineering side with the ML side and the data engineering side to solve the labeling problems. And maybe that has like an explosion, more growth if we can get away from the platform problems, So because that has huge downstream effects too. And that's like, how do you automatically label a data set? And that's a problem I think a lot of people could work on for sure.
Let's see, another question. If you are at a company working on a platform that is already developed, but you want to gain exposure to newer other things, is it up to you to build the side project or to achieve that? Yeah, I think this is always a question. Like, how do you get experience basically with other tools, essentially?
I would always say, like at work, don't build kingdoms you're not authorized to build. that's the mistake a lot of developers make. But the way I would always get experience with that is I would start side projects or I'd participate in like open source projects. As far as like wanting to gain exposure to newer other things, sometimes you have to quit. The issue is that like I know this from building pipelines myself, is that we naturally expect a certain amount of turnover, and we're not going to give you, let's just put it this way, there's an expected number of turnover that you expect in a pipeline, and the company does that on purpose, and so they're not always going to give you an opportunity, even if they say they are, so just understand sometimes you have to find another opportunity to really get that advancement you're looking at. And a lot of times you find it at startups where you're not going to find it at established companies. Like most established companies have a way they do this shit, and the last thing they want is someone coming in and changing that unless there's a really good reason. But anyway, so like sometimes this is why working at startups is valuable, getting to go to a startup where they, like I was giving you that example when I went to work for a small Adobe certified solutions provider, that gave me the opportunity to build platforms, And so you're often not going to find that if you're looking to get hired at Facebook. It's like, it's just the way it is. They have a way they build software there. They want to stick to it, So don't be afraid to take startups seriously, and like especially if you're young, If you have a lot of time left in your career for earning and retirement and stuff, like take the risk. Go join a startup, man. That's where that's where all the action is, in my opinion.
That's definitely where you do all the learning. I think I just posted about this earlier today. I'm like, if you're going to a startup because you think you're gonna make money, you're in the wrong choice.
90% failure rate, dude. 90% failure rate at startups.
Wrong choice. Just look at Fast. All right, they were trying to pay people fairly and they couldn't because it's just too high. Like if you were to do the math, if money is your only goal, go work for a FANG. That's where you're gonna make over a 20-year career. Probably more money statistically than if you were to shoot it at a startup. But learning wise, you're going to learn way more. And
way more, dude. And have way more fun, probably,
Yes.
I would say use your early years to get that experience. And if you hit it big, great. Just, it's a 9 in 10 chance it won't. But man, you're going to get to build teams. You're going to build platforms. You may screw up a lot, but that's okay. So like, it's a startup.
It's a startup. No one's looking at you seriously just yet.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
Exactly.
I think that's where I learned a lot of stuff that then eventually got me a FANG role, and then now I'm just doing consulting because it's like now I just get to like see all your other problems. I just get to see a lot of people's data stacks, and it's all the same problem 30 times over.
Exactly.
Oh man, where was something just happened? Where was this? I don't know how long you want to stay on, by the way. So there's a ton more questions.
Yeah, let's take some more questions, man.
All right. Do you think data engineering and data science jobs eventually basically become one thing in the future? Will they kind of mold and automate out the middleman?
No, I think that data science is going to become the commodity in a lot of ways. We're already kind of seeing like leading indicators of this now. Like there are companies that specialize in making specific discrete models that do like specific things. And I think that's only going to increase, and that auto ML will be a lot more popular for a lot of tasks than maybe it is today. So I think actually the demand in data science will go down. I think that the quality of the data scientists will have to go up, so like there will be less data scientist jobs. The ones that are available will be for like pretty awesome published cited, scientists who are really well respected, because what we're going to be trying to get beyond are like really hard barriers at a certain point. Like the auto ML will carry us through like in a lot of discrete problems, but at a certain point we're going to need to solve really fucking hard problems. And not that that isn't happening today. There are a lot of people dealing with those really hard problems, but that's going to require a different level of data science than maybe what we have today. I think on the data engineering side, computer scientists and mathematicians could also get involved, where like a lot of these indexing strategies get really complicated, and like a better way to query data, like you may see an explosion in the number of tools that are out there right now. We're kind of like, it went from like Presto and Spark, and then it was like Dask and Rapids. Like there'll be a lot more advancement opportunity on the hardware software combination side, I think. And that's why I kept going back to the thing, as a data engineer, you may need to retool, like you may need to get these other skills that take you lower level into the system architecture so you can like speed these things up. Because I think that's where a lot of the innovation is going to take place on the data engineering side. And so it's kind of like bifurcation is really what I see happening,
I think what I was thinking, like, I mean, retooling is like, if you're in technology thinking you're not gonna have to retool, like unless you've got like some specific technology, you're in the wrong place. Like I learned Java originally, I still remember public static void main, and I have not used it professionally ever. Like just never. C#, a couple of Python, a few other things, obviously SQL plenty, but never Java, which obviously there are plenty of people that use it. Like you brought up,
I was using it for a long time. I did Scala for a few years,
but
VB. I mean, dude, Perl at one point I was even doing Perl scripting, so yeah, you just got to learn constantly, man. But I think that's the commitment, right? Is like lifelong learning. This shit changes fast, so yeah. But that's what I kind of see happening. I could be wrong, against speculation. It's just kind of where I see the industry going.
Yeah. What did I say? So I think this person's asking about, Brian's asking about Palantir, right? Like, in your opinion, how do these synergies with Carahsoft and Accenture playing out? Which party has the most to gain, and do you see any risks with these moves? That's what I'm assuming, right? I know Accenture is partnering with them. I don't know what Carahsoft's doing with them.
It's always tough to tell who gets the most out of like a partnership, but I think only time will kind of tell there. I think the Accenture thing is old. I think that like that actually happened over a year ago, but like they just announced it formally this year. So it's hard for me to know, like I feel it's huge that they publicly announced it. Like I was like stoked, because that means that like whatever nervousness there was around that partnership, like maybe there was a public relations problem or something, or like they were worried about Palantir's image. What that shows is that like people are getting over that. That's huge for this company. Like the more that happens, that's going to accelerate mass adoption faster than the technical breakthroughs, I think, is a lot of the PR image stuff. And Palantir is quickly becoming, like with these partnerships, synonymous with like really big business. And so I think that they're breaking that image problem, and it's quickly going away. Carahsoft was interesting because I don't know a lot about how that works, other than it was somehow impactful in the government space. So I have literally like no knowledge as to what they do, how it would help them. But to me, like I see Accenture as a leading indicator that people are getting comfortable with this company, and that's like a huge deal. But whatever work, like actual business, was coming out of that deal, I think was already baked into the cake, probably. That's my guess.
Yeah. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's usually when you see Accenture, it's a lot of staff aug because it's like we can't handle what we currently do. And that was something I saw. I was like Palantir has 3,000 employees. How in the world is it supposed to expand with 3,000 employees? Probably, I assume half of which, if not more, are doing actual building for Palantir, not going out and deploying. So it's like, how are you supposed to be building this? So it makes a lot of sense that they picked someone like Accenture to kind of be like, okay, we gotta start pumping this out.
Totally. They're building more of those partnerships too. Like their channel partner networks are getting bigger, which is really cool. Just to see like even smaller businesses that they're partnering with to do the training and like get people onboarded. That's growing quite a bit as well, and that's another really good sign that they're gearing up for like a mass adoption kind of thing. It's closed still currently, but yeah, I was really happy. And I thought that was a huge announcement with Accenture. I was like, hell yeah, dude, that's like. Let's get more like let's just throw that old image problem in the dumpster and move on, So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Okay, let's see. This next question, I feel like I at least know a little bit about your answer based on some of your videos. Where do you think the cloud is going from here?
That's a good question. Sky compute layer. So like the CEO of Databricks was the first person I kind of heard talk a lot about sky computing, but like all of the lower level, like, okay, first of all, every cloud provider's control plane is just dog shit and no one wants to work in it. Like if you're a developer out there and you like CloudFormation and AWS, there's something wrong with you. Like there's just, it's terrible, and like you're spending like to give you an idea, like we just deployed a simple API gateway with some Lambda functions the other day. And I think there was like sub 500 lines of Lambda code and like over 500 lines of CDK code. It was like fucking completely insane. And like, the CDK code, if you don't know, that's the code that's telling Amazon how to provision all your stuff in their environment, right? So like I'm going way over the code that actually does anything. I'm spending at least or more time writing the code that tells Amazon how to provision my shit. And so like the Sky compute layer is basically to say like, no. We just want expressive ways of writing code and you figure out how to make the infrastructure from my code. So like instead of like, writing all this esoteric DynamoDB queries, I just access something like data.get, right? Data.set, and you figure out how to provision that from my code. And I don't ever want to know about it. And it should be interoperable on-prem, on GCP, on Azure, on AWS. And I should never have to think about it again. And so the leading indicators are services like Versal, serverless cloud, which I just built an API on yesterday, and then services like Palantir and Databricks, right? So like, and Palantir, in my opinion, is way the fuck ahead of all that stuff because of their use of Apollo. Plus, they have such a robust platform, and like they even have like the ability to do like the equivalent of serverless functions. Like you can write functions in TypeScript that serve as a gateway layer into your ontology. So it's like kind of like writing code in Lambda, but like it has all the unit testing and deployment built in. I just hit a button, So it's like I don't even have to. It's like even less than what I have to do probably with serverless cloud. I can do that with Foundry, So. And then Foundry's entire API layer is completely obfuscated. They run like hundreds of microservices through Foundry you can access through Kubernetes. I don't have to worry about any of that or orchestrate any of it. So it's this Sky compute layer that basically says, I don't write any infrastructure as code. I don't know or care about where my shit is running. And that's going to lead to a decentralization, I believe. Like really what's going to happen with applications, what's going to spur decentralization is that you can have redundant compute, a homogeneous compute layer all over, right? Right now, we don't have homogeneous compute. We have like specific control planes we're writing this shit for, and different constructs those environments need. But what eventually will happen is this homogeneous compute layer will be layered in and through platforms like Foundry and Databricks, like and services like Versal, where you're just writing normal code, And I think that's what will end up happening at some point.
I think the one thing that was funny is like you said you deployed Lambda with a bunch of API gateways. I'm like, what? You missed the announcement?
I saw it today. Yeah,
you missed the announcement. They said no more API gateways.
No, but you can deploy one function and call it, right? So it's like, oh yeah, one function. Shit, we can all retire now. Like that's awesome. I was like, yeah. No, dude, one function. I was like, I mean, there are a lot of use cases. I was like, I could have actually solved that. That could have solved a few use cases I have actually, but. It's just kind of crazy like how they've completely ignored developers on that front. Like they always say, oh, we listen to our customers. Well, why aren't you listening to your developers? Because I don't know any of them that are happy with that, like with how hard it is to really and when I say hard, it's like I'm lazy, like I'm a developer, okay? Like I know it's not hard, like technically hard. It's just time consuming and redundant. And no matter how many generators I layer in on this crap, I've still got all these NPM dependencies to manage. I spent half my time managing breaking changes between different versions of these things that are meant to maintain the abstraction layer and all this other crap that it just doesn't, it's not working. So I really hope they listen to the developers, but I would be very happy. Like what I think should happen is like AWS should take all of its services like that it offers, like Kinesis and Lambda and all that crap, spin that off into separate companies and like let them actually build something that developers want to use. And then make AWS core AWS just about the compute layer, empowering this like sky compute layer. But it should make you really nervous if you're a company that's not building on open source tech or a platform like Foundry or something with full enterprise support. Like what happens when that shit goes away? Because I don't think all those services are going to be super successful. Like take AWS Cognito. Is like that better than Auth0? Like, is it better than Okta? Fuck no, it's not. It's like, do you really think subpar marginal services will survive forever? And if you're stuck with AWS and their services, like maybe you missed the boat there. Maybe you should have been like building on more open source or holistic platforms. Like I kind of laugh when people bag on Foundry, like it's so invasive. Yeah, but you can run it anywhere. And all the code you write is like, it's actual business value code. It's like they're just providing this abstraction layer so you're not locked into these vendors. Because like the minute you start accessing SQS or SNS or Lambda or API Gateway or all these other like vendor specific constructs, those aren't portable. Foundry is. And like so like that, I think companies are missing the boat here when they're not looking towards the future where like all these other positive developer experiences are going to be enabled. And most of their stack is built on one cloud provider and they can't move it. They're gonna have to do a total rewrite,
Yeah, I think I've had a few conversations with customers. More. I don't know what your background is with Airflow, but like Amazon has managed workflows or managed whatever for Apache Airflow. And I've been trying to move them all onto Astronomer just because Astronomer's like, look, this is all they do. They like literally contribute to the Airflow code base, and this is what they do. I promise, it's a better solution.
Do you know how many arguments I had with people over that shit? Because it's like, I wrote this article about a year and a half ago. It's called like Cracks in the Walled Garden. And it's about all of the overlapping and redundant services. And then all of the ones they offer that are just open source technologies with a side of vendor lock-in. That's all it is, dude. Like they're not, it's like, it's kind of frustrating because on the hardware side, they innovate like crazy. Like their hardware innovation is amazing. Their software innovation is terrible. Like they're literally just taking open source tech and repacking. In not all cases, like DynamoDB is pretty cool, but I mean, although like if I was designing a tokenization system, it would not look like DynamoDB's tokenization system. I mean, it's like completely freaking bizarre. Like I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but anyway, they do have some novel, really cool services, but like for the most part, it's repackaged open source tech that is got like their control plane wrapped around it. Like, why do I want that? It just doesn't make sense. So I'd say learn to manage that shit on your own, spin up EC2, and then you're deployable everywhere. And people would often criticize Foundry like that though too. Like they would say, "Oh, you're getting vendor lock-in." I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like all of the Spark code I'm writing is fully portable outside of Foundry. Yeah, I got to build the services that I didn't have to build in the first place. That's not vendor lock-in. That's just like I didn't have to build that shit. I can take the code that I wrote, take it out of Foundry. There is a lot of people don't know there is a migration path out of Foundry too. So like, there is a way to get out of it if you want to. But the point being is that code you didn't have to write is not vendor lock-in. Code you had to fucking write, and now you have to rewrite. That's vendor lock-in.
This is very
There's a difference, dude. So anyway.
Yes. Let's see. Next question. How long has each of you worked in a startup? I'll let you take that first, and I can kind of jump in after.
For a long time, man. Like I did 10 years. Well, no, now so it was 10, 12. So I'm going on 14 years in startups, So 14 or 15 years. I freaking love it, man. Like compared to the corporate culture, I think it's just way, way cooler. And like I like the opportunity to be able to like design full engineering platforms, which I know I wouldn't get to do anywhere else. But I'm like on 14 or 15 years in startup culture. But at the same time, I did get the benefit for like 10 of those years of working with really big companies. It's like being able to work with Adobe was huge. I couldn't have gotten the experience and know-how I have without working with some of these big companies. I mean, that's why consultancy is sweet, man. Like if you get to work with bigger companies but do it on your own terms, like that's pretty cool. So but anyway.
No. I was say I've done about 2.5 years at like a startup, and then like at this point now I'm consulting with a combination of like startups and then like some more mid-level markets. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to consider my consulting at this point also in the same space, because then it's probably 3 or 4 years total. And then I got another couple of years in like more of like healthcare, and then a couple of years at big tech. But yeah. Consulting has definitely been a lot of fun, because again, you get to see so many different things, so many different ways people do things. It's wild. You get to restart a lot of people. You get to reset a people stack. I think it's like the biggest thing I like about like doing like you said, like startups and things of that nature, is like you get to do, you're the solutions architect. Like you're like, this is my world now. Like I get to take this. We're gonna build this my way, and then we're gonna go with that. So that's kind of why it's fun.
Yeah, you don't get that opportunity, unless you're kind of in those cultures, So it's such a fun experience, and I definitely recommend it when you're young. When you get to be my age, you need to set yourself up, I think, a little bit, because the failure rate is so high. Like I wouldn't recommend it if you were worried about your financial future at my age doing this shit. Like it's scary, So 90% fail. 9 out of 10.
Let's say 10 more minutes. That way I don't keep you too long. And unless you need to go before then, but I'll say 2 minutes is probably good. So we put some sort of end to this. But yeah, like the 90% failure rate makes me think of like, again, when you do the math and you're like, okay, I could possibly make $10 million. But that's a 90% chance failure rate. It's only really worth, like one, So anyway.
Have you ever heard of people selling options and losing money too?
Yeah, it's like you lose money on taxes. You can lose money on the fact that like, oh, Uber was valued, and that's like the biggest problem currently, right? Like a lot of startups right now are like day one, they're like valued at $1 billion.
Yep.
And they're making $1 million in ARR, and it's like it screws over all the developers or all the employees, right? Like how
totally does. Yeah. That's why, like, if you're going to work at a startup, ask them to see their cap table. So like, before you kind of jump in on I'm at the point now where I'm so jaded that I don't even care. I'm just like, whatever. But like, yeah, if you're serious about it, ask the startup if they're giving you options. Like, ask to see their cap table and what their valuation looks like, and then that'll give you an idea of like, does this 100,000 shares or whatever, like, does that equate to like real value? And just assume they're going to slice that pie up like 15, 20 more times before there's an exit. If they do well. So just a heads up.
Let's see. Okay, so when do you get out of Foundry? Do you get a maintainable system? Or what maybe it means, what do you get out of Foundry? Do you get a maintainable system?
Is he talking about the migration path out of Foundry?
I think that's kind of what he's referencing.
You wouldn't get a maintainable system, because all the parts that Foundry provided, like pipeline monitoring and like the ability to version the releases and like maintain all the data backups and like all that kind of stuff, like, because with each release you get full data history, all the security governance, like you're gonna have to build all that, but you can take all of your pipeline code, all of your function code, SQL code, and it'll still work. All your data models, you can export out those things as artifacts as well. I'm not an SME on that process, but they have talked to me a little bit about migration paths out, because I'm always super what is the word, like just scared typically when I'm dealing with platforms. Like, how do I get out of this I'm always more concerned about, like, I don't give a shit if the design decision is a good design decision. I just care that I can change it later. That's kind of where I'm at with most things like that. And so, but knowing that they actually have a migration path out is really cool. But no, you would not be left with a maintainable system. You would have to fill in the gaps of all of the things that made it a maintainable system in Foundry. But again, that's different than rewriting stuff you already wrote to do that. I'm not burning that investment and time.
Yes,
that's my perspective on it. Anyway.
I think it makes sense. Let's see. This is, oh man, I'm cutting my head off as always. So I was like, I used to have a stand when I was doing this, and I realized I need to like not have the stand because I'm cutting out.
Yeah.
So I think this is always a question people always ask, like, what tool should I learn? So basically, I'm seeing a lot of new tools and technologies popping up every day in data engineering work. What are your suggestions on top 3 important tools, skills, tech, for someone that's new, to get started with ease? No FOMO.
With ease, that you're asking a lot to get started with ease. The only platform I know of is Foundry that's going to let you start with ease. I would say, like, I actually value Spark a lot. Like a lot of people have shit all over Spark, but I actually think it's the most important kind of big data engineering tool you're going to wind up using. Not only because Foundry has it at the heart of their platform, but like Databricks has it at the heart of their platform. There are better tools. I'm not saying that there aren't better tools, but if you want to get started, I would say Spark would be a great tool to learn and really master it. Like it's a lot of people don't realize a lot of the power that's in that platform, but like, how are you also going to deploy it and manage it? And like build Spark job, submit jobs to the cluster and actually make that thing hum. So I really value that tool a lot. I think that a lot of people too have been like, they've been using a lot of AWS tools. So like you're gonna find like companies have used tools like Athena and AWS Glue and like some of these like AWS native services, Redshift. Those are the most widely adopted. Like a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to learn that, but they're super widely adopted. Like look at the adoption rate of those tools. You'd be crazy not to learn them. Especially if you're starting out. A lot of them are serverless. It's like you don't have shit to maintain, and you actually get to work directly with the code and the query languages without having to worry about the cluster setup. So those AWS serverless services like Glue and Athena, those are really valuable in my opinion to learn. And Redshift, even though Redshift sucks, but like you don't
like, we all agree on that.
Yeah, but it's super widely adopted, like it's something like over 60%, I think, of the Columnar market or something is Redshift. So it's it's a pretty big service. Anyway, that would be my advice when you're starting out, kind of learn those tools.
Yeah, I think that's what, like, you referenced like learning Scala earlier, but I think like if you're first starting out, it's like Python maybe.
Yeah, don't learn Scala if you're first starting out.
Yeah,
that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like you want to be as marketable as possible because you just need a job, right? Like that's focus one. And generally, again, Redshift, Power BI, like tablet, like these things are so ubiquitous that it's just like if you have these skills, it's more likely you're going to get hired.
Big time. Big time.
I was trying to think like, and then the Redshift thing just comes back down to like the distribution thing, right? Like I think Azure's like been gaining on market share because it's like Azure, like these things have distribution. Like it's just so much easier to click, use this tool versus go find a vendor, sign a contract, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why, like, I don't know. Again, I'm talking to a lot of like startups that are in the data space. It's like you guys got to figure out some sort of like way to distribute your product because that's going to kill you. You could have the best product, and as engineers, I think we want the world to be like a meritocracy, like the product win.
Exactly.
And that's not how it works. I'm sorry for anyone out there who thinks that's how this world is. It's not.
That's why everyone's, that's the best product doesn't always win. I think that you really need something unique. That's why I'm so bullish on Foundry, like in Palantir, is that it's not all those other things. It's just a total different thing. But you're right on the distribution problem because, like you said, like what is the kill rate going to be of Amazon, Google, or Azure with their customer base for a tool you're trying to compete with that they're going to offer at a click of a button? Their kill rate's probably going to be 100%. You got to be, I mean, if you are that much better, you need to be at least 10x better. Like you need to have some shit that is like light years ahead. It cannot be marginally better than a service those people offer or could offer. Because if you're just marginally better than a service that AWS, Azure, or GCP can easily offer as part of another suite of services they offer, the kill rate will be 100%. It's not going to be fucking 50 or 40. It's going to be like 100%. And you can just look at past problems where that's been the case. Like Amazon has had a near, I think, perfect kill rate. So like, I know I don't want to bum people out, but that's kind of the reality. Like the situation.
It's just this. The weird way the world works. It's not even weird. Like it makes sense. The whole like no one got fired for picking IBM kind of mentality, and then also the mentality of like it's like downloading an app. Like the more you can reduce that friction, the more people are just gonna be like, let's try it out. Let's just do a POC with this AWS component. It kind of sucks, but it works. So let's just deal with it. So
no, I mean it's weird. Like, but the consumer market can be different. The consumer market is that it would be a shift in the consumer versus enterprise, because that marginal difference in the consumer space makes a big difference. I think, so like if your algorithm, like if you're using Spotify and Spotify's algorithm is just marginally better than YouTube Music, you will tend to use that algorithm that is marginally better than the other one, even if you have a lower barrier to entry because you already have a YouTube, say, Pro account. So like that's at least what the data shows. And then there's like, the responsiveness problem. Like click rage is a real deal, and like if your app is like super responsive, like YouTube is a fucking amazing app, dude, for video.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why it's been so widely adopted. It's like it's just so good at what it does. Anyway, diverged.
It's all good. I think we can probably start wrapping it up. I have Chris Patel asked me one question, like how would I sell Foundry? I think that's definitely an interesting question. I think the one thing I know, like I definitely don't have a good answer that I could answer in the next like minute. I think the one thing I would focus on is their ML ops focus, just because like that's still the problem that is the largest. Like forget all the other stuff. Like people have no idea how to do ML ops. And that's a new problem. That's like I think 2015 was the year that the Google paper came out about like the technical debt of ML models, and that's like what kind of spurred ML ops in itself, right? Like where they point out like the ML model is like this big, everything around the ML model is like this big, and so I think like focusing on that use case and figuring out how to like hit people there is the only place I could probably reference in this 1 minute of answering the questions. Like, yeah, just like focus on that. Stop talking about like, because I think they recently talked about like, oh, we do the data mesh and like their Japan something post. It's like, it's just getting confusing. Just focus on this one use case that like no one knows how to do anyway.
I told them. That's exactly what I told them. That's exactly how we're positioned internally. I did tell them too. Like I do like the federated data idea because I hate GraphQL and I want actual performant layers for my application. But at the same time, ML ops seems like the killer use case. I think you're totally right. And I did a video about that a little while back and told them that like, and it just is the lowest friction place because no one's got it, like no one knows really how to do it. And when they try to do it, there's like all these services they want to put together to manage it. And then they run into this. And again, it's like a science team, you have teams that should be focused more on the science. They shouldn't be focused on try to do all that engineering work. What's funny too is that like Google in 2017 then came out with their paper on federated learning and then like made the problem 10 times harder. Like it was like, thanks guys, just keep kicking us in the teeth over here.
There's constantly trying to make sure we have a hard enough problem to buy all their services.
Exactly.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dorian. And if anyone wants to know, go look up Codestrap on YouTube. I think codestrap.me will get you to your website. I'll probably share it in the live link below as well. And yeah, thank you so much again. Awesome. I really appreciate this conversation. It's great just to talk more on the tech side. So I really appreciate your time.
Same. Thanks, Ben. I'll talk to you, man.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.